Yella Massive, Bombini, bienvenue dans l'iPhone. L'épisode du jour sera différent des précédents car nous recevons un invité. Le podcast se déroulera également en anglais, alors si tu ne comprends pas cette langue, active les sous-titres avec la traduction automatique. Manners Milton, way I deal with.
What going, and nice to hear from you.
Yeah, man. You know, say, when time me say massive, like just now, me think about you, you don't tell me say one girl big people them use it. But anyway, me still use it. Yeah, la
Well, well.
massive. So Milton, we actually met online. You posted an Instagram reel on which you were speaking 5 languages. Yes, 5 languages. So I shared it and you discovered my page, Get FWI, and then you were surprised to see that French Caribbean gal rating patois song. So we know each other a little bit now, but can you introduce yourself to our listeners?
All right, hi everyone. My name is Milton Foster. Je suis jamaïcain. J'ai 24 ans.
Mhm.
Et je parle maintenant 5 langues, comme on dit, comment vous avez écouté. Uh, right now, I work as an audio engineer in Kingston, Jamaica, primarily in film and TV. And I also am the Jamaican Polyglot. I
Mhm.
host events for language learning, and I try to encourage people to, uh, not just learn foreign languages, but to dig into their hobbies. I feel like in everything that I'm doing, both on the audio side and the language side, I've just always been driven to pursue my passions and just see what comes of it. So
Mhm.
yeah, that's me.
That's awesome, really. So you just said that your nickname is the Jamaican Polyglot, and you just spoke French to us. Thank you. Next time you will have to speak French-based Creole. I will teach you some
Uh
some Guadeloupean Creole.
no man, you have to teach me, man. You have to
Yeah,
teach me because
yeah, yeah. I
I
will
don't know
teach you.
any
I
I don't know
already
any
have
Guadeloupean Creole.
I already have an online workshop that is free and that is specifically for English speakers. So
Okay.
I will share it to you. So your nickname is the Jamaican Polyglot, while you just said that your professional field is more related to audiovisual. So what got you into languages, really?
Um I can't answer that question precisely because it's a number of things. First of all, I don't come from a multilingual family.
Mm-hmm.
Um Here in Jamaica, we speak English and Jamaican patois, even though here most people don't really see patois as another language.
Yeah.
But I guess I can attribute it to having met a few people in my formative years in what many would call elementary school. Here it's called primary or prep school. Um, and just finding out from an early age that people who speak other languages exist.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think the main appeal for me would have always been music. Because I'm a big music fan. I'm a musician myself, and I love
Okay.
hearing music from other cultures.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember when I was in the second grade, I was about 5 or 6 at the time. Our Spanish teacher had my class do a choreographed performance of La Bamba.
All right. Okay.
Para bailar la
Sí, sí,
bamba.
sí. Yo veo.
And yeah,
Ujú.
I can't even remember the song. I haven't listened to it in so many years.
Se
But
necesita una poca de gracia.
but I mean that performance, I remember it being so um I wouldn't say pivotal, but I can remember the little white sailor suit that I had on to this day.
Okay.
And I think we did it like 3 or 4 times in front of the whole school because they
Wow.
loved it.
Oh my God.
Um, but I wouldn't say that language learning really kicked off for me until I reached to high school, like in the latter years of studying for my CSEC and my CAPE exams. So
Mm-hmm.
here in Jamaica, we have I'm not sure how it is in the French Caribbean, but in the English speaking Caribbean, we sit exams that are similar to like the British O levels and A levels.
Okay.
And when I was getting closer to that time, when I was getting closer to actually doing my exams, at my high school, there were like language exchange programs where there were students from at least one other country, Canada, who came and they spent a week in Jamaica. And then some of the older students got to spend a week in Canada, French speaking Canada.
Nice. Okay, I was about to
And yeah,
ask if it was French Canada or English
yeah, yeah,
Canada,
yeah.
but obviously French.
Montreal, Quebec.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I remember seeing that. Unfortunately, my year didn't get to do that.
Okay.
Womp, because it kind of stopped just as soon as I got into the grade to be able to do it. I
Mm-hmm.
guess money.
Yeah.
But and there were also students at my high school whose parents worked at embassies, and all of the Spanish speaking students kind of would stay together. And I was just always curious, because there were one or two who didn't speak any English at all,
Oh.
and I I felt bad that I couldn't even say, this is a beef patty, or
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
welcome to Jamaica. I remember looking in my dictionary trying to put together a sentence to talk to these two
In
Cuban
Spanish?
girls in
Yeah.
Spanish,
Okay.
and I just felt so embarrassed, but they
Yeah.
appreciated the effort.
Nice, nice,
um,
nice.
so yeah, I guess with time, I really wanted to be able to dive into Latin culture at the time, and to be able to communicate with the people at my school. So I just started looking up language learning tips on YouTube one Christmas holiday.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Downloaded as many apps that I could find for language exchange and learning vocabulary. Um, yeah, and I just haven't stopped
Okay, until now.
until now, 8 years later.
Yeah. Very inspiring. And so you said that most of people in Jamaica they don't see patois as another language. How did you yourself consider patois as another language?
Um, it wasn't until I went to university in the States,
Oh,
in
okay.
Florida specifically.
All right.
And um I'd say there's a huge Caribbean community in the state of Florida,
Definitely.
but it's still the US nonetheless.
Yeah.
So I remember talking to some of my classmates and having a brain freeze because I realized that I would try to explain something to them and I'm like, that's not English, and that's not
Uh-huh.
slang. That is
Uh-huh.
patois, and that's like the grammar structure is totally different. And then especially at that time, I also made a lot of friends who spoke Spanish. So I was speaking to them in Spanish a lot, and I would want to make comparisons to stuff that would happen in Jamaica.
Mm-hmm.
And when I would try to explain it to them, I realized that they weren't understanding what I was saying because I was speaking patois. So
Okay.
but over time, I kind of drew parallels between, English, patois, Spanish, and eventually Portuguese.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I I realized the stigma that we're kind of taught here in terms of our linguistic heritage here in
Yeah.
Jamaica. So, it's not something that I would have necessarily recognized just being here,
Mm-hmm.
but especially having traveled and yeah, talking to people from other parts of the world, I'm just like, oh,
That's how
I
you
guess I did.
realize.
Yeah.
Most of the time, that's the way we realize. People have to travel to meet other people, to go abroad to realize what they have home and to, you know, give sense to that language or to that culture that we have. So you talked about Spanish, you talked about Portuguese, French, etc. Do you target as well Caribbean regional languages such as Papiamento or such as Caribbean Spanish, French-based Creole? We just spoke about it. You're not into it as yet. So do you target these languages? Why and why not?
I like how you say as yet. um, I mean, maybe in the beginning I was thinking about the fact that Jamaica has a lot of Spanish-speaking neighbors.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I wouldn't say because Portuguese isn't a Caribbean language.
Yeah.
It's really what I find interests me is not really the language per se, and I know that sounds weird, but I'm naturally drawn to cultures that have a similar history to Jamaica, are of not only similar ethnic makeup, but just in terms of like the Americas, how we
Mm-hmm.
came to be fascinates me a lot, and the different cultures that are found on this side of the world. So but I wouldn't say I've targeted Caribbean languages per se, but of late, I've been more and more interested in the languages spoken closer to home
Mm-hmm.
because weirdly enough, when I started practicing Spanish, I used to speak with an Argentinian accent.
Okay. Because
And
your application was set on Argentina
yeah,
or
I met quite a few people from Argentina
okay,
in
okay.
the early days of me doing language exchanges,
All right.
and their Spanish is like totally different to. We're actually taught European Spanish, so Castilian Spanish. I mean,
Oh, okay.
here in Jamaica.
All right, all right.
So the pronunciation is totally different. The
And
double
even the
L sound,
words.
the words,
Mm-hmm.
But then after a while, as my accent got better, people started to think it was kind of strange, because I mean, there's not a lot of people that look like me in Argentina. And then yeah, it was just kind of weird.
Yeah.
But also I find that Caribbean people have a particular flair.
Mm-hmm.
We have a vibe,
Definitely.
that people
Definitely.
can't really replicate. So when I
Mm-hmm.
started listening to like Dominicans, oh gosh, that
Okay.
their Spanish sounds like patois to my
Yeah,
ears.
it's definitely hard to me to understand Dominicans. It took me
Mm-hmm.
a whole week to understand their Spanish, and I thought I was fluent.
Oh no, man, it's taken me more than weeks,
Oh,
man,
yeah.
because the pronunciation and so on.
Yeah.
But um over time I just find that I'm very gravitated towards like that particular variety of Spanish in particular because I've said particular a lot of times. But their humor,
Yeah.
Dominican humor, man. I feel like Dominicans are the funniest Spanish speaking
Probably.
nationality out
Mm-hmm.
of all of them because they
Mm-hmm.
just have a flair and they just have a vibe.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, even the people from the coast of Colombia, I don't know. Of late, I've just been finding myself gravitating towards those varieties because I don't. It just feels close to home. Even though we're not speaking the same language, I
Yeah.
can find in those regions and in those dialects something that kind of reminds me of Jamaica
Yeah.
or of the warmth of the Caribbean.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Yeah, that's it. And if we take a look to Debí tirar más fotos, the newest album of Bad Bunny.
Oh, I haven't listened to it yet.
Okay,
I saw a clip of the short film.
yeah. So
But I haven't listened to nor seen the full thing yet.
through this album, so Bad Bunny is from Puerto Rico, but
Mm-hmm.
through this album, we can definitely see how much Caribbean Puerto Rico is, even though it is still the States, you know? And that artist said that he aims to promote the Caribbean, especially Puerto Rico, but promote the Caribbean. So the way he chooses to put the short films to I don't know which one you watched, but for example, there was a man in the US probably trying to speak English, but at the same time with some Spanish Spanish words, or not even words, but Spanish references. As you just said, when you were in the US, you were trying to explain something, but that was patois because the references were in patois. Anyway, so we can definitely found the Caribbean vibe in those countries as well, even though they are Spanish speaking countries. And I feel like you will tell me if I'm wrong, but I feel like English speaking Caribbean don't realize that they are not the only one to be Caribbean people. I don't know if you understand what I mean because
Yeah, yeah, it's so and I found myself kind of coming upon this realization
yeah,
because it's not something that's exclusive to speaking Caribbean people. I realized that the more I speak to Caribbean people across the diaspora,
yeah,
um less so in certain countries, but even in Cuba and Damrep, for example, when they think of the Caribbean, they think of the big three. They think
yeah,
of
yeah.
Cuba, Damrep, and Puerto Rico. And if you speak to you know
To a
the people from the
Jamaican,
Dutch speaking, if you speak to a Jamaican, they're gonna think of Antigua, they're gonna
Trinidad,
think of Trinidad,
yeah,
they're gonna think of Saint Lucia, and of course Jamaicans.
yeah.
So it's even though we're right next to each other, we kind of are in our own worlds because I guess we were kind of um brought up that way in terms of how the countries were run
Yeah,
from
divisions.
then to now, you know? So, but
Definitely.
I would love to see more Caribbean people just seeing us as one region. I feel like that happens more in the States or in other places where there's like a Caribbean diaspora, like
Yeah,
the
because
UK.
they actually gather. So,
Yeah.
Walipa Caribbean people, they just gather at one place. And so they realize that, oh, we are a community. But
Hmm.
when we are, as you said, in our own spaces, we just, rep our own flags. But
Exactly.
that's one
Exactly.
region out of many, one people, as you say.
Hmm.
So you posted a very accurate and helpful video with 10 tips, I suppose, to aspire multilinguals. So you told us already about the applications that you were using, but what was your learning process really when you first decided to be fluent in more than two or three languages?
Well, I didn't start trying to be fluent in more than two or three languages.
Oh, okay, okay.
That's I actually never thought that I would learn anything other than Spanish
All right.
for a long time. But I did know that I wanted to speak without an accent. That to me is a phenomenon that when I found videos of polyglots or language learners online, that when you heard them switch languages, you could
Yeah.
tell that it wasn't just someone who was trying to
Communicate.
appropriate another language or a foreigner speaking that language, but it was really somebody who dove into that culture. So
Yeah.
but my learning process, excuse me, my learning process really just entailed just exposing myself to as much of the culture and as much content possible. I'm not really a book learner. I used to get home from school every day and I would binge watch videos on YouTube from channels like BuzzFeed in Spanish or other channels that was just like content but for Spanish speakers, and even though I didn't understand a lot of it in the beginning, it was something that was interesting. So I was watching it anyway. And I used to listen to songs. I mentioned in the video that I would play songs back at half speed to try to analyze exactly what the pronunciation was because I would be listening to a lot of this music and um listening to the artist and I'm like, yeah, but that doesn't sound like the words that are written on the paper. So after I started like slowing things down and looking at the words, I started to realize like the how they join words together, which vowel sounds they leave out, how certain sounds vary depending on where the artist is from or where the TED Talk speaker was from. And that taught me more than any book. And also talking every day. I started off trying to learn the 500 most common words
In
uh,
Spanish?
in Spanish.
Okay. In
I
Castellano or which Spanish?
I mean, I used to use this app called Anki. It's a
Oh, okay, okay.
flashcard app.
Yeah, yeah.
So there's a community of people who create like decks of
Mm-hmm.
cards. And the thing about the app is that it's very intelligent in how it shows the information. So each time you see a card, it either shows you the front or the back of the card, or you can put in audio clips, images, etc. And you rank how easy or hard it is for you to remember that information the next time you see that card.
Mm-hmm.
And it uses an algorithm to filter the information that you need to see and the information that you need to practice. So, using techniques like that and talking every day, being corrected, talking to people from different regions,
Mm-hmm.
it was just a bunch of different things that just made the learning process very natural and very gradual.
Yeah.
But it also made it so that I could progress very quickly.
All
I'm gonna wait
right.
for this bike to pass before I continue.
So I find it really easy to develop listening skills and reading skills. But when it comes to speaking, it's always more difficult. What advice can you give us to improve our speaking?
Um, and I have a couple of videos about this that might already be out by the time this podcast comes out.
Mm-hmm.
But if you want to speak a foreign language, you should speak it.
Yeah.
Simple, plain and simple. Listen to it, um, and try to mimic that as closely as possible.
Yeah.
Um, I yeah, I don't know. I don't think there's a science to it, even though there's probably studies that can attest to the efficacy of methods like that. But if you think about how you learn languages as a child, there's nobody who has to teach you your mother language. Like
Mm-hmm.
you don't pick up a book until you're like 3 or 4 years old.
Yeah.
But for those 3 or 4 years of your life, you spend the time literally just listening and soaking up everything that you're hearing
Mm-hmm.
around you,
Mm-hmm.
and then trying to imitate those sounds. So why wouldn't you do the same thing if you're trying to learn another language?
Mm-hmm.
Because if your primary goal is to speak the language, then you have to have a reference.
Mm-hmm.
Because what many people do, and this is how many people struggle to improve their accents or to really understand foreign languages, is that they use their advantage as adults to understand intellectually how the
Yeah.
language works,
Mm-hmm.
right? But when we were kids, when we were babies, we didn't understand how the language worked. We just knew that if we said a particular sound, it would elicit a certain response. And then we started to identify those cues and started to string sentences together. And over time, we were corrected, our grammar is corrected, and then we start to grasp those concepts of language. It's a very natural thing. So, if you're trying to improve your pronunciation, stop trying to read the language as though
Mm-hmm.
it were your native language, you know? And I know a lot of people tell themselves, oh, but I'm not going to listen to this if I can't understand it. The whole point of listening is to make the foreign language less foreign.
Mm-hmm. That's
To make it so
nice.
that you're familiar with the language, with the sounds of the language, and you have a reference point that you can try to hit, And over time, the more that you listen and the more that you speak with natives or people who have a very advanced level,
Mm-hmm.
you're just naturally gonna get better,
Yeah.
you know. Um, Not knocking language teachers or anything. But I feel like when you have a teacher of a foreign language that is not very very advanced in that language, or is a native speaker themselves, that can also influence your own pronunciation.
Mm-hmm.
So I can tell many times when I hear, say for example, Jamaicans speaking Spanish, I almost in my mind know where they learned it from, because I can tell, like, everybody from a particular area or a set of institutions has a similar accent.
Mm-hmm.
So it's all about your point of reference. So if you set your point of reference as a native speaker, somebody who has spoken this language their entire life, or is really really advanced, really really proficient, then over time, you will just absorb that and get there eventually.
Okay, thank you for your wisdom. So back then, I was really okay, yeah, comfortable in Spanish and in English because I was sucked into, that atmosphere, that vibe. I was studying languages. I was studying at Puerto Rico, then I went to Trinidad, then I went to Jamaica. I traveled a lot. So I would practice a lot. But now that I am back to Guadeloupe, I no longer practice as much as I would like to. So I feel like I'm losing my Spanish. I feel like I'm losing my English. And that's very frustrating for me. So, how do you handle this losing, languages?
Um, when I started the process, I realized that this would be a common theme, or this is a common theme for many people who learn languages. Um, they felt that they were really good when they started a number of years ago, and then they felt like their language skills kind of trailed off over time. And I always said to myself, I never ever want that to happen to me,
Mm,
which is also why I didn't really want to learn more than one language, because I much rather speak 2 to 3 languages well
yeah.
than to
Speak
than to
plenty,
speak
but
yeah than to speak
average.
7 languages poorly.
Yeah.
So but going back to the question, in terms of combating the forgetting curve, or just forgetting languages in general, um, I tried to, or I've made as many friends as possible
Mm-hmm.
in my target languages, and they've just become ingrained in just my everyday life.
Yeah.
So I had set out with the goal of meeting as many people from all of the Spanish speaking countries that I could
Mm-hmm.
when I started learning. And even though I haven't met persons from every single country, I do have most of them in my WhatsApp. So every other day, I have at least 1 or 2 friends from Colombia, from Peru, Mexico, República Dominicana, Colombia, Brazil, Argentina, Puerto Rico. Like, I have friends from all over the world,
Yeah.
and we keep tabs on each other every now and again. Of course, there are people who sometimes you only will see them on Instagram,
Mm-hmm.
but every week or every other week, I'm talking to one of my language exchange friends or one of my friends from college, um, and even to the people that I've met here while hosting events and creating a space for language exchange and language practice here in Jamaica. So um, I haven't really had that issue a lot. I mean, it
Mm-hmm.
really affected me in the pandemic when
Oh,
it was
okay.
like a stark change from uh, being at university at the time and every day seeing people who spoke each of the languages that I spoke, and we would talk to each other in the corridor and we'd have lengthy conversations, to just being at home.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to kind of ensure that I was still digesting content in the different languages to keep those languages alive in my brain. Um, but yeah, if you have those types of connections, it's gonna be natural for you to maintain the language. And I'm not saying that I haven't forgotten anything, because
Mm-hmm.
that would be a lie.
Definitely.
um, but because there are certainly times, there are times when I've spoken more Portuguese than Spanish, or more
Mm-hmm.
Spanish than Portuguese, or uh, you know, a little bit more French, and it's you're inevitably gonna trip up at some point.
Yeah.
But again, the more you talk, the more you'll be able to keep those things separate.
Mm-hmm.
And just with little things like, yesterday I gave my phone to somebody to give me their number, and they were just like, what is this? And I was like, what's the problem? And I was like, is your phone in like French? I was like, oh. I didn't even realize, because it's like, when I decide to learn a language, I just do all these little things that
Mm-hmm.
make it so that I interact with the language every
Mm-hmm.
day, but so that I'm not really thinking about
Yeah.
practice,
Yeah.
So things like that.
Yeah. My issue is that I have only multilingual friends. So we start a conversation in English, then we switch to Spanish, then we end with French, and then with Creole. But one thing that we would do, my best friend and I, she is from Dominican Republic and Saint Martin. So she speaks Spanish, French, English, and now she speaks Creole. We would decide to speak one language for the day, for example. So maybe on Mondays, we will speak English, then on Tuesday, Spanish, and then on Wednesday, we would speak another language. So we could do that when we would see each other like every day. No, we just text each other. We call each other maybe once a week, but we definitely have to get back to it because I'm telling you, I'm losing my Spanish, my English, and I don't like it. All right, one last question. So in Guadeloupe, I host an event called Campo La Bala Cacha. That's an event in Creole which aims to reconnect Guadeloupeans, Dominicans, Lucians, and more to French based Creole so we can preserve the language over the upcoming generations. So, what I really enjoyed when I discovered your page is that you host as well an event that you call Link Up. So, I would like to,
Language link up, yeah.
yeah, language link up. So, what's your goal with this? And what gets you into it?
I guess I can say there's not many events for people who like the kinds of things that I like here.
Mm-hmm.
So, I guess I was just bored, really. Plain and simple. And I was tired of just meeting people online, and just talking to people online.
Yeah.
And I wanted to bring back that feel of when I was in university, and I would just be walking in the hall, and I hear somebody talking on the phone in Portuguese, and it's like, "Você é brasileiro?" And they're like, "Oh my gosh, yes, você é brasileiro também. Like, are you
Mm-hmm.
Brazilian?" And I was like, "No, but I speak Portuguese." And like, immediately we'd be friends. And so I just find those kinds of spontaneous interactions very enriching. Um, and I've come to realize that, I mean, living in the Caribbean, we're a tourist destination. So there's always people who are traveling to Jamaica,
Yeah.
from other parts of the world, who speak different languages. There are expats that live here and work here. There are even there are locals that have traveled to other parts of the world, and they speak other languages proficiently. And I was like, why isn't there a space for everybody to just meet and mix
Mm-hmm.
and mingle?" you know. So I didn't necessarily start it with the intention of building a community. I kind of just wanted to meet people and meet more like-minded people.
That was
And
a selfish goal at the beginning. That
well,
was for you.
well, put it this way.
Yeah.
Um, yes and no, because I already have my friends from all over the world that I can
Mm-hmm.
talk to. But I I kept feeling like the more I met people here that wanted to learn languages, everyone kind of felt isolated. Everyone feels like language learning is this weird, obscure hobby that they're
Mm-hmm.
doing in their corner, in their room,
Yeah.
and there's many more of us than you would think, that are actually into this type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So, more so for the the people who have been meeting along the way, the more I share about language learning here, it's really for them, to get out there and experience what that feels like. Because I've had many interactions like this, and I've seen how it has helped me in my own journey. So why not provide a space for other people to experience that as well?
Mm-hmm. Okay. So I can't wait. I already told you that I can't wait to take part of these language link ups. I
Oh
can't
yeah,
wait.
man. Whenever
So
you're ready, man. Whenever you're ready.
next time me come to Jamaica, hmm, I'm coming. Okay, so thank you very much, Milton. Merci beaucoup. Remember to follow Milton on his platforms. I will put everything in the description. And we soon come back for another Laipan. Nous nous retrouvons bientôt dans un autre Laipan. Merci à toi et à dans d'autres
Merci.
soleils.
Merci, Anne. Merci. J'aime beaucoup parler avec vous et je souhaite que... Ah, let me not embarrass myself here. Mais je voudrais que tu passes une bonne journée.
Ah, thank you, thank you.
Et merci à
Likewise.
toi, l'écouteur, pour écouter ce podcast avec la meilleure, avec Anne Love et Get
Oh,
FWI.
thank you. Je ne l'ai pas payé, hein, c'est une publicité gratuite. Allez, lick more à dans d'autres soleils.
More.
Tradition là-haut, c'est, Apia, quoi jubilé.